Chainsawman is one of, if not the most hyped anime coming out this year. And come on, after the visual feast for the eyes that was its trailer, it's no wonder why there's so much anticipation surrounding the anime. Eventually, it was enough to make us cave and go check out the manga. And we were treated to a visceral and wild ride. If Mappa does the series justice, and we know it will, this is going to be an absolute banger of a series. But visual effects aside, in today's video we'll explore some of the really compelling world-building elements and themes that have developed in the manga in depth. These being the hidden truth of Hell and the devils themselves. Now, those of you who haven't read the manga, you might want to go ahead and do so first, especially if you don't want a single element of the series to get spoiled. You can choose to leave now. In fact, it's pretty easy to catch up, with part 1 closing at only 90 chapters. But for those who choose to stay, we promise to leave out the majority of the story's major plot points from this video, so as to not completely defile the storytelling and ruin the experience of the anime and manga. This video will still be relatively safe for those who won't mind minor general spoilers that pertain strictly to the world building of the series. And we have to say that the world building of Chainsawman is definitely its most shining point. One of these aspects being the main topic of our video, the hidden truth of the devils and hell. Welcome to Cosplay-FTW, your #1 source for the latest lowdown on anime and manga news, updates, and analysis. Sit back, relax, grab some snacks, and before we get into this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell so you never miss an update. Now, let's dive in. From the very start of Chainsawman, we're met with the deadly threat of devils, and later we learn how they are manifestations of human fear, as explained by Makima. Now, this is really interesting. The devils are essentially concrete thought forms created by the group consciousness of human beings. A better word for them would probably be egregores, autonomous entities created intentionally or unintentionally by a group of human beings. The idea of egregores originated in esoteric schools of thought. According to them, a group can come together in many ways, such as a political party, a church, a corporation, or a country to create an egregore, for better or for worse. And if we really think about it, it's quite simple to personify these concepts. I mean, we see artists personify random things all the time, from social media apps, to plants, heck, even poisons. You can even think of it this way. What characteristics and qualities come to mind when you think of the United States, or Russia, Amazon, or McDonald's? In this way, we can personify all of these almost into their own independent entity. In our world, none of these are physical, of course, but you get the picture. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, a major developer of theosophy, said of egregores, "Every thought so evolved with energy from the brain creates willingly or unwillingly a shape. Such a shape is absolutely unconscious unless it is the creation of an adept, who has a preconceived objective in giving it thought form consciousness. Or rather, the appearance of consciousness derived from the adept's will and consciousness." Looking at it this way, the gun devil is the unintended manifestation of the collective human fear of guns. But I mean, how many people a year pass from gun violence? This isn't exactly an irrational fear to have. But with the amount of collective mental energy humanity poured into it, it only makes sense that the gun devil would be pretty damn powerful. Makima goes on to explain that the deeper the collective human fear, the stronger the devil, foreshadowing that there are devils much stronger than the gun. And it doesn't take long before we're introduced to a category of devils so strong that they defy all reason. The Primal Devils. Devils that represent the fears that all of humanity has harbored since times immemorial. And this is where, for us, things start to get really interesting. The first and only Primal Devil that we get a glimpse of is the Darkness Devil, and our time with him is so short that it definitely raised more questions than it answered. And yet, its time on screen, or on panel? Anyway, it's the most impactful introduction to a devil we've gotten in the series thus far. I mean, the Darkness Devil smooth pulled up on a red carpet of entrails. Who can top that? Now, we're not going to go through all of the symbolism featured in the chapter with the Darkness Devil. There are other channels that have done a great and thorough job of that already. In fact, here's a really great one. What we want to chew the fat of is the nature of these devils and hell, and how and why they exist as they do on a deeper level. We want to get into the disturbing, hidden, and yet beautiful truth of Chainsawman's hell and its denizens, and perhaps speculate just a little bit. Now, we know we just said that we weren't going to do this. Okay, it's just going to be this one symbol that we're going to focus in on, and that is the most prominent symbol featured pertaining to the Darkness Devil, the astronauts. Darkness exists above us naturally. We have no choice but to submit to darkness in many ways, through sleep, through death, through looking up at a vast night sky into the very cosmos, and those of us who reach it are only further dwarfed by the depth of the unknowable void of space. In this way, the astronaut is the perfect depiction of humanity's lack of understanding of the unreachable and unfathomable, despite some even having spent their entire lives trying to grasp it. And the number of those who have lost their lives in this pursuit, 11 in total, is the same as the number of bisected astronauts that pray to the darkness, unable to comprehend it. The poses of supplication to the Darkness Devil, the very unknowable darkness, worshipping it, is all that they can do, as we humans have the habit of deifying or mystifying that which we don't understand. Their state of prayer suddenly makes more sense. I mean, this might even be a vague allusion to the God gene, called Vesicular Monoamine Transporter 2, a hypothesized gene that predisposes human beings to believe in gods and worship them, and to believe in something else which we see featured prominently in Chainsawman, an afterlife. But, before we get into that, let's explore the second meaning of darkness: ignorance. For human beings, space is the greatest physical representation of the unknown. After the explosion of the Big Bang, the heat cooled, crystallized, and consolidated into observable and non-observable dark matter and deep space. This is the void that represents the physical final frontier, with the astronauts representing the ultimate heroes of our society, facing this final frontier of our material conquest of the universe. But Chainsawman's creator, Tatsuki Fujimoto, does something beautifully profound here. He juxtaposes this pursuit of the physical unknown with what the Tibetan Book of the Dead describes as the inner frontiers of the human consciousness itself in all of its transformations. The final inner frontier being the mysteries of life, death, and beyond death, the space between death and birth. This direct comparison is emphasized by the surrounding hellscape, which appears almost dreamlike in quality and just as surreal. The inner and outer mysteries couldn't be more clearly represented than in these panels, with the Darkness Devil's astronauts representing the conscious realms of precept, concept, causality, relativity, and sensation, and the environment and the Darkness Devil itself representing the subtle realms of image, light, ecstasy, trance, dreams, and finally, death and its beyond. In this way, we can understand why the Darkness Devil is insanely powerful, but probably not for the reason that is so visibly apparent. And yet, the vast physical unknown is still dwarfed by the subtle unknown of the mental realms. Despite the fact that Tatsuki Fujimoto is coy about his usage of symbology in his series during his interviews, he did reveal getting visual cues for hell from certain films, and there are references to mythos within the Darkness Devil's design. But we can tell that he really put thought into his depiction of hell to make it different from familiar depictions we've already seen before. He is quoted saying, "If I tried to depict hell without thinking about it, it would end up like Eclipse from Berserk." In fact, Berserk's hell and those like it are likely what most people envision. The Dante's Inferno archetype of hell has really been seared into our collective psyche, no pun intended. But whereas Berserk's hell feels so concrete, Fujimoto's hell is much more dreamlike, surreal, even non sequitur, and mostly unmanifest, almost seeming to reveal itself as needed, and even when it does, it's impossible to be understood. There are, of course, elements and imagery that are instantly recognizable, even if they are still incomprehensible to the conscious mind. Things like an endless storage cabinet sky above, existing until it's no longer needed, and then the scenery jarringly and instantly transforming as the Darkness Devil reveals itself. Because hell, the devils, and fiends are derived in the consciousness of the human mind, this is why there are immediate visual cues that we do understand. In this way, both Fujimoto's and Berserk's depictions of hell are extremely fitting for the cultural groups depicted in their respective stories, despite being so different. The rivers of blood and monstrous beings that seem to have risen straight out of a depiction of Dante's Inferno work for a society steeped in the zeitgeist of religious belief, and the medieval time period of the story represented by Miura. But Fujimoto's hell fits a more scientific society, giving it a very different flair but similar visceral impact. In this way, hell's depiction in both series is equally impactful. For those who understand unknowable and untold fear through a religious worldview, Miura's depiction makes sense. But for those who have an increasingly scientific understanding of the world, even bordering on scientism, Fujimoto's incomprehensible, unpredictable, faster than light and endlessly shifting version of hell might be even more terrifying. Maybe because the wisest among today's modern society are mature enough to understand that the more we know we don't know. It makes complete sense that hell would look different to human beings from another time period, even varying cultural groups. And despite the timelessness of particular archetypes and symbols that are deeply ingrained within the conscious collective, no doubt these will be modified as the human collective consciousness develops through time. What is undeniable, though, is that both are equally fitting. And there's something to be said here about hell's depiction in anime showing an almost seamless transition from the age of Pisces, an age of belief, religiosity, and sacrifice, to the age of Aquarius, an age of rapidly expanding knowledge and information, scientific discovery, especially concerning the quantum field and the cosmos, and consciousness expansion. I mean, look at the astronauts, for crying out loud. But that feels like a whole other video, so let's just move on. Again, we need to draw comparisons between the Tibetan Book of the Dead's description of the Bardo, or the in-between, and what has turned out to be a major theme in Chainsawman, the reincarnation cycle. The Bardo isn't really a book about death. It's about what occurs between the stages of death and birth, this in-between time that is rarely discussed. In Chainsawman, human reincarnation is not spoken about, but the reincarnation of devils and fiends is outright exposed. It is through this that we probably find the greatest similarity between devils and their human counterparts, the overwhelming fear of facing the unknowable. The devils that have all incarnated to Chainsawman's Earth all admit to having heard the revving of a chainsaw prior to their birth into the human world. And here, we have to take a brief detour to mention the origin of the chainsaw itself. As horrific and unbelievable as it sounds, chainsaws were originally used in childbirth to help the mother deliver a baby. And the doc didn't just rev the chainsaw from behind her. In cases where the baby's shoulders were stuck, or the baby's head would not transition in the right manner through the birth canal, or in instances of breech birth, a hand-cranked chainsaw with fine cutting teeth was used to cut through her cartilage and ligaments to get the baby out. The use of chainsaws in childbirth has long been considered one of the most controversial practices in the medical field. Now, we can't believe that the connection between the fear surrounding the mysteries of death and rebirth, and the connection to birth and chainsaws is by accident. And if someone had asked us what all of this had to do with each other before doing some in-depth research, we'd be scratching our heads too. The juxtaposition here is clear, with human beings and devils standing on either side of fear, known and unknown, death and rebirth. This just paints too vivid a parallel to ignore. It's truly beautiful, and adds way more depth than what we thought was there going into the manga. And even though we don't quite know exactly where Fujimoto is going with this, we think this aspect is what truly made us buckle up for the long haul, to see how much of these mysteries Fujimoto plans to explore. On a final note, in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, it is said that after death, consciousness exists in what some might refer to as the astral plane, before its next reincarnation. And on this plane, things are able to manifest at the speed of thought, that is, instantly, which would explain the very sudden and near inexplicable appearance of the Darkness Devil, the seemingly random appearance of a frog, and out of nowhere a line of bisected astronauts with entrails strewn across the grass. The Tibetan Book of the Dead also recognizes fear as the greatest human impurity. In this way, we can understand that humans create hell. Human consciousness created this hellspace and its infestation of devils, and these are mere manifestations born out of the human collective consciousness, a mental womb that incubates that which they fear. In the same way, we would argue that the hell in Chainsawman exists on the subtle or mental realms, the astral plane, the place where thought forms become manifest, born from human ideations. But it is in this bardo that spiritual adepts explain that the inner subtle experiential realm is the single most important realm to assert control over, in order to direct subjective and objective cosmic events. And in Chainsawman, we recognize how this is true in the deepest sense. If humanity could simply let go of their persistent fears, especially surrounding death, perhaps there would be no more devils and no hell altogether. In the same way, how to live and prepare for the final transition of death from this form into the next is rarely even discussed and not treated with the importance that it should be. The result is that extreme terror and misunderstanding surround the idea of death. Not to mention, this can lead to an endless cycle of death and rebirths over and over again. In Helena Blavatsky's cosmological model of the universe, she systematically breaks down a symmetrical structure of the universe in the form of a hierarchy, from crude physical matter to the most subtle and spiritual substance. According to her, the unity of this system is provided by the egregore representing humanity's concept of the absolute, the transcendent, limitless source emitting an energy that is not limited to the physical picture of the world. This often being understood by human beings through various spiritual or religious philosophies. Which begs the question of whether an opposite and opposing force to the devils does actually exist in Chainsawman. And perhaps if humanity's collective consciousness had a better understanding of death and their own connection to unlimited and eternal consciousness, many fears surrounding the topic would be put to rest. Perhaps humanity could focus more strongly on things they did not fear, and similar egregores and heavenly astral realms would come into existence as well, at least just as powerfully as the devils and hell do. We don't know for sure, but all we can say is that the reality is that in Chainsawman the suffering of human beings is truly self-inflicted, and herein lies the hidden truth and tragic beauty of hell and the devils. But what do you think about our little theory here? Maybe you think we're completely off base. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you like deep dive analyses like these, then you should check out our last one on My Hero Academia and the School to Villain Pipeline. We like to develop experimental deep dives like these because it's actually really fun to make them, even if it is tedious. So, if you guys actually like these kinds of videos, please give this one a like and feel free to watch some of our other stuff too. It really helps us in the algorithm. That's it for now, and we'll see you in the next one.